Welcome, and thank you for listening to this presentation. We are Group 13, representing Quantfolio Solutions. Today, we will be walking you through our 5-year strategic investment analysis, conducted on behalf of Horizon Management. This presentation outlines why Denmark stands out as the most attractive real estate investment opportunity among OCAD countries from 2024 to 2028. Our recommendation is grounded in predictive modeling, economic forecasting, and scenario-tested analysis, all structured around the CRISP-DM methodology and supported by over a decade of OCAD macroeconomic data.
So, moving on to the business overview, Horizon Management approached this project with a critical question. How can we identify a fiscally sound and resilient real estate market in an era where global debt is reaching record highs? Interest rates, GDP growth, and fiscal stability all directly influence real estate returns, making this analysis extremely important for forward-looking investment planning. Our approach was broken down into three steps. First, we constructed a forecasting modeling for Denmark's government debt to GDP ratio. Second, we evaluated the drivers of housing market demand, including labor force trends and urbanization. Our study builds on the foundation of pricing sensitivity analysis, and we tested our recommendation under three different global economic scenarios to ensure resilience and find the target investment.
Next is the data preparation. To build a reliable model, we began with 20 datasets, spanning the years 2010 to 2023. These covered key variables such as public debt, GDP, interest rates, tax revenue, FDI, and unemployment. After transforming the datasets into a long format specifically to Denmark, we performed data cleaning using drop-NA functions and converted all relevant figures to numeric format. We trained our model on data from 2010 to 2020 and reserved the years 2021 to 2023 for model testing. Dummy variables were introduced to flag post-COVID years, allowing us to account for structural fiscal shifts after 2020. This ensured our model accurately captured both long-term trends and pandemic-related volatility.
Next, we're going to talk about the modeling framework. This is the outline of the modeling framework used to forecast public debt ratios. A total of 38 regression models were developed and tested across OCAD countries, with predictor selection guided by correlation analysis, specifically focusing on variables with coefficients greater than or equal to 0.5 or less than or equal to negative 0.5. The final model selected the unemployment rate, which on average had a negative relationship with debt, and tax revenue as a percentage of GDP, which showed a positive correlation. Forecast accuracy was validated using MAPE scores to ensure reliable projections. Based on these models, debt trajectories were forecasted from 2024 to 2029, and each country was classified into one of three categories: decreasing, steady, or increasing debt ratio, which signaled strong, stable, or weaker financial fiscal outlooks, respectively.
Now to introduce the dummy variables. To reflect changes in government policy and fiscal behavior after the pandemic, we incorporated a post-COVID dummy variable and a corresponding interaction term. These adjustments allowed the model to recalibrate the slope and intercept of our regression model post-2020. This was critical in accounting for Denmark's structural policy shifts, such as increased government spending, income tax reforms, and changes in debt accumulation trends. By doing so, we enhanced the predictive strength of our model and improved the robustness of our long-term debt forecasts.
So, moving on to forecasting, Denmark is highlighted as the top performing country in our debt to GDP forecasting analysis for 2024 to 2028. Among all OCAD countries evaluated, Denmark stood out due to its steep projected decline in public debt and the model's low MAPE score, which was around 4.17%, indicating a high forecast accuracy. Other strong performers included Poland, Canada, Switzerland, and Germany, but Denmark outperforms, making it a leading candidate for fiscally responsible investments.
Next is our recommendation. So, through correlation analysis, we identified the most statistically meaningful predictors for Denmark's public debt, the unemployment rate, and tax revenue as a percentage of GDP. The final model achieved an adjusted R-squared of 0.924, indicating that over 92% of the variation in Denmark's debt to GDP ratio is explained by predictors. Additionally, the model's mean absolute percentage error, or MAPE score, was just 4.17%, a strong result that falls well below the industry threshold of 10% for reliable forecasting. We therefore recommend Denmark as a top investment destination for real estate between 2024 and 2028. The reasons are clear. First, Denmark exhibits strong economic discipline with a steadily declining debt burden. Second, the unemployment rate is falling and tax revenues are stable, indicating sound public finances. Third, the nation offers a transparent and investor-friendly policy environment. And finally, the country's largest urban centers, Copenhagen and Aarhus, face persistent housing supply shortages driven by high urbanization and a growing working population. Together, these factors create a fertile environment for real estate investment. Nearly 90% of Denmark's population lives in urban areas, with working age demographics continuing to rise. The demand for housing in urban centers remains intense. At the same time, housing supplies in cities like Copenhagen and Aarhus has not kept pace with this demand. OCAD indicators and external sources like Statista confirm that these sites are experiencing wage-driven consumption growth and favorable housing dynamics. Lower interest rates combined with expansionary fiscal policy and real disposable income growth are reviving housing investment across the country.
This graph represents both historical and forecasted public debt as a percentage of GDP for Denmark, covering the period from 2010 to 2028. The solid black line illustrates actual debt data from 2010 through 2023, while the blue dashed line represents the predicted debt levels from 2024 to 2029. The shaded blue region highlights the 95% confidence interval, providing a measure of the forecast uncertainty. From 2010 to 2023, Denmark's public debt ratio exhibited a clear downward trend. The debt to GDP ratio declined from approximately 38% in 2010 to 22% in 2023, despite a temporary spike near 35% in 2020, likely associated with pandemic-related fiscal stimulus. This post-2020 decline demonstrates a return to fiscal consolidation and sustained economic recovery. Denmark's forecasted debt trajectory confirms its strong fiscal outlook. In our base model, the debt to GDP ratio is projected to fall from 21.52% in 2024 to just 15.28% by 2028. This downward trajectory signals robust macro fiscal health, suggesting that Denmark is well positioned to maintain fiscal discipline while potentially expanding its investment capacity. Importantly, the forecast is supported by previously mentioned 95% confidence interval, indicating strong model reliability. The interval narrows slightly over time, reinforcing confidence in the downward trend. This forecasted reduction in debt burden improves Denmark's risk profile and strengthens its appeal for long-term investment strategies. Moving on to our scenario analysis.
We then evaluated how Denmark would perform under three global economic scenarios: base case, adverse, and optimistic. In the base case, Denmark's debt to GDP ratio is expected to decline from around 21.52% to 15.28% between 2024 and 2028, supported by a stable tax revenue and a steady drop in unemployment rate from 3.62% to 2.22%. The sustained downward trajectory reinforces fiscal credibility, keeping debt level well below the EU stability and growth pact level of 60%. These conditions suggest a stable macroeconomic environment that supports investment confidence. The housing market remains healthy, and Denmark has fiscal space to stimulate growth if necessary, reinforcing its position as a resilient and low risk investment. So, moving on, in the adverse scenario, where unemployment rises by 5% and tax revenue fall by 5% annually, the debt ratio climbs towards 28% by 2028. This increase reflects a slower GDP growth and a modest fiscal pressure, but remains well below debt distress levels, showing Denmark's capacity to absorb fluctuations. In the optimistic scenario, stronger employment and increased tax revenue allow for debt reduction, potentially lowering the ratio to around 12%. This then creates room for pro-growth investments and infrastructure expansions. In both scenarios highlight Denmark's resilience, with the adverse case showing manageable risk and the optimistic case showing the potential for economic expansion and urban housing demand.
To conclude, Denmark offers Horizon Management a uniquely stable and high potential investment environment. Its projected resilience, decline in debt levels, strong labor market fundamentals outlined by low unemployment, stable tax revenue, and its expansionary policy outlined by external research, and consistent urban housing demand all make Denmark a strategic choice for long-term real estate investment. Even under moderate economic stress, Denmark retains its fiscal credibility and real estate appeal. Therefore, we recommend that Horizon Management prioritize real estate investments in Copenhagen and Aarhus to capture the benefits of urbanization, fiscal responsibility, and sustained growth. Thank you for listening to our presentation.